Well, we can start if you want, and we can go on through the questions that you have had the opportunity to see, and maybe it's a good moment. We are just finishing the year, and it's a good moment to make to look back and see what has happened, what has been good for the company, for Mindshare, what has been not so good, the challenges, the opportunities, the successes, what has been going on this year.
First off, thank you for having me. I think obviously to say that this has been an unprecedented time is a gross understatement. It's probably one of the most overused words of the last 2 years. But if we look at what's happened over the last year in particular, suffice to say, it's been categorized, at least within our industry, as incredibly tumultuous. Lots of pitches, high turnover, people reassessing what they're looking for, and that sort of thing. One of the things that we're probably most proud of is you look at where we stood in terms of the defenses that we were facing this year. When we started the year, we were looking at Unilever and Ferrero and Dyson and Facebook and a number of defenses, and the average retention rate globally is about 35 to 40%. Ours was 2.5 times that. With the defense of Unilever and Ferrero and a number of others. And so, one of the things that we're incredibly proud of is that, we're pushing almost 80% in terms of defense rate. The not so good is the other 20% that we unfortunately didn't retain. But I think it's something for us to learn from and to build from. And, one of the things that I'm proud of is our people and the resilience that they've shown through all of this, not only in delivering pitches and winning new business on top of all of the defenses. We're set to grow at a pretty good rate this year relative to last, and even over the last 2 years, our growth rate is up a couple of points. But when you look at the work that we're doing amidst all of the challenges that we're facing, we were just announced as WARC's #1 media agency network in the world, which speaks to the fact that despite all of the challenges, we can still do amazing, groundbreaking work that's in service of our new proposition and vision for good growth in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just mentioned good growth, which I suppose it is a big part of the plan and ambitions to develop this new strategy, this new positioning, or whatever you may call it for the company. How do you envisage? We will talk later about good growth, but looking now to 2023 and 2022, how do you look at the new year?
So I think, first of all, through the lens of good growth, I think we need to recognize that actually more and more brands and businesses are starting to realize that growth is attainable by almost everyone, but it can often come at the expense of other areas of business or the world around us. There's unintended consequences of putting your product on short-term promotion, right? You can absolutely grow if you discount the product or you change distribution or whatever the case is, you change formulation, but it's not sustainable, right? So, when we talk about what's starting to happen right now, there are a number of tensions that are emerging right now: short-term versus long-term, immediate sales versus brand building, D2C versus retail. All of those sorts of things are starting to come to the forefront of everyone's minds. And what we've started to realize is there's tons of empirical evidence right now that those concepts of growth and doing good aren't at odds anymore. And so if you look at that as the barometer or the filter for success, it should hopefully create a really fine point as to how businesses need to operate in the future, and therefore for us, what our role becomes in helping clients succeed and grow. One of the brands that we always hold up as a kind of beacon of success is Patagonia. And there was a great article over the weekend by Ryan Gerhart, their CEO, where he essentially says, one of the things that they're the most proud of is the fact that their biggest contribution hasn't been the money that they've given away or the industries that they've supported or anything of the sort. It's the fact that they've categorically proven that businesses can do more and need to do more than just stand for profit and making money. And at the same time, you can still do that. And so, it's an incredible testament to the fact that we think that there is a future where, those two concepts come much more to the forefront. And we believe, as Mindshare, we have an obligation, given the position that we occupy in the world, to change the vision of what growth looks like in the future. So hopefully it lays some of the foundational work for clients to reassess the way in which they go to market, and in turn inspires the industry to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and in terms of business, do you think it will be a good year, or there will be more? There will be still be certain amount of uncertainty, or how do you see it?
Yes, so, I mean, certainly you look at the last 2 years and you look at what's happening with, the new variant that's out there. There's no question it's going to continue to be incredibly volatile and fluid over the next, I would argue more than a year. But we are starting to see resilience in terms of ad spend coming back, in terms of clients looking not just to go back into the marketplace with different budgets, but to truly transform what they're doing. Not just to think about how they optimize around the edges and think about digitization, but actually how they think about digital transformation. And there's a big difference between those two concepts. And so, I think the volatility is going to force a lot of clients to think about the way in which they do business, because if nothing else, the rate at which businesses are being disrupted and disintermediation is happening, whether it's through platforms or third-party resellers or whatever the case is, it's happening at an exponential rate. And I think the businesses and the brands that are smart are starting to realize that they no longer have the luxury of kind of sitting back. They need to lean into this disruption and embrace what it means for them.
Okay. Well, let's go back to good growth, and I would like you to explain a little bit how was the thinking process by which you came to good growth, to that concept and that idea. And how clients are, I don't know if you're showing it to clients and making it known to them, and how they are seeing it, that they like it, how it has been received.
So first of all, it's absolutely public facing. We want this to be not only something that we stand for, but a rallying cry for the industry, that we believe we have to stand for wholesale change as an industry, and we have an opportunity to. If you think of the purchasing power and the degree of influence that we as an industry have over, decisions that are being made in consumers, we have to reflect their needs, we have to reflect their values, and we have to lean into their expectations. One of the stats that we often lead with that I'm kind of obsessed with is 71% of 18 to 24-year-olds, in other words, the future audience of most organizations, they believe that standing for a cause is imperative for a brand or a business. And here's the thing that I love. They believe that it's imperative even if the motivation behind it is financial, or if it's to avoid public scrutiny. In other words, they just come to expect it more and more. And so when you start talking to clients and brands and businesses about what that means for them, they start to realize that the idea of doing good and good and good business aren't at odds anymore. And NYU Stern has proved it. JP Morgan has recently come out and said over the course of the last 18 months, brands that stand for purpose and have high ESG scores, they're not only more profitable, but they're more resilient in downtimes. And I think back to your question about what's happening in the marketplace from a business perspective, that should be one of the things that every business looks for, is the degree to which they can bounce back from some of these downturns in the economy. And so, when we think about what we need to deliver and the future of growth, it sounds like a simple concept, but it's a journey that people need to be taken on, because it isn't always easy, and it means thinking about your brands differently, thinking about how you lean into consumer expectations differently. And it really means understanding your consumers at a whole different level, so that brands and businesses can not only deliver value, but align to the values of consumers more and more.
Okay, of this conversation, or many things that you mentioned in your words, brings us to this field that has been identified with the three letters ESG: environment, social, and governance.
Yeah.
And some people think that they are a competitive tool for agencies, or even for media agencies, in the face of clients. Do you think clients consider media agencies credible consultants that have authority in this field? They are talking to you about these concepts, or it's simply something that you have to have in mind because it's in the zeitgeist, let's say, or they ask you about it, they seek your counsel on this thing?
I mean, we certainly don't have the ambition to become an ESG consultancy. Make no mistake, we don't have the credibility that a pure play ESG consultant would have. But I think if you are not thinking about it as an agency and you don't constantly have it in the back of your mind, you're missing a trick. Because of, as I mentioned, changing consumer expectations, the competitive nature of how the landscape is evolving, disintermediation that's happening, and more, simply what's been proven in terms of the value that high ESG factors represent in business these days. So, from our perspective, ESG equates to understanding consumers better, understanding their expectations, and helping businesses deliver on that ambition. And media and marketing, make no mistake, has a critical role to play in that. You are often seen, and this is where greenwashing happened, and you're often seen and called out as disingenuous or duplicitous if you're not taking into account those sorts of things. So our clients that are leaned into environmental sustainability, we're talking to them about carbon calculators to offset their media plans. For those that are concerned with data ethics, we've created tools like the Data Ethics Compass that help clients not only think about how they acquire data, but actually the application of that data, so that they meet consumers' changing expectations of how their data and information is being used. And so, again, it goes full circle. You have to have these types of things in mind. More and more, simply because it's an expectation from consumers, and if you don't, you're getting left behind as a business.
That's a very interesting concept that you have mentioned, that you talk about in the document about good growth, and is the big tech companies and big technological platforms, not such as that, but as new countries, which is, I think, is an interesting way of seeing them. Let's talk from two perspectives, one from media agencies and then from the consumers. Should they be considered allies or enemies, or what's the feeling about them at the moment? How do you see them from the professional and personal point of view?
Yeah, so I think it starts with the recognition that they're not going anywhere. I mean, you look at the consumer demand and the usage of them right now. I mean, TikTok's at 1 billion users, and they did that in 3 years. The scale and the application of them is absolutely unparalleled. So to not think about them is an incredible miss. But you have to think about them, through the lens of responsibility. You have to think about them through the lens of consumer motivations, most importantly. And I think the interesting thing is we talk a lot about not only the geographic scale and application that they bring to the table, but also the unique mindset that people are in when they're living in some of these platform ecosystems, and the need to tailor and respond to consumers' motivations when they're using them. You know, the mindset of somebody in Facebook is wildly different to a commerce-driven platform like Alibaba or or Amazon or whatever the case may be. So understanding the mindset. Sometimes they need a shot of dopamine. Other times they need some sort of financial incentive, and yet still other times they might be looking for empathy and community. And so there's a big push from our side to think about platforms and lean into platforms through what we call platform storytelling, which is uniquely being able to understand the precision of audiences with the empathy or the human side of motivations. And so if you start to do that, then actually the role of the platforms become less controversial, less daunting, arguably, and much more of a friend. But you have to be able to understand those innate motivations and behaviors for consumers. Otherwise, you're simply relegating them to a scale play, and you're simply using them for reach. And yes, they will always have a role in that context. But it becomes much less about relevance and resonance. And I think that's the critical miss that our industry needs to think much more about in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, one concept that is coming from one of the platforms or the companies that is the owner of one of them is metaverse. That is the word of the month or the week of the quarter. I don't know. What's your take? And are you? I mean, even personally, are you interested in it? Are you curious about it, or do you think it's more of a topic of conversation at the moment, a bit of a fad? How do you see it?
Yeah, so I certainly you're right. It is certainly the topic of conversation at the moment. I think the ones probably benefiting the most right now are the semiconductor industries that are going to arguably power this in the future. From a personal perspective, and even from a business perspective, I think yes, if you're not thinking about the metaverse, you are turning a blind eye to what is likely going to start to evolve and take shape. What that looks like, I think there are wildly different opinions on. I don't believe that there should be one owner of a meta platform. I think it needs to be democratized. And I think what it represents for consumers, again, it goes back to the role of the platforms. In many cases, we're talking to our clients about meta through the lens of omnichannel selling. Where every touch point is an opportunity to bring a consumer into the brand and to sell. And if that exists in, an Oculus-like platform, or whether that exists in their owned channels and owned spaces where you can do deep product demos and that sort of thing. I do think there's a role for it, but I am certainly concerned over the thought of there being one ubiquitous platform where everyone spends their waking moment, and like Ready Player One, I certainly hope we don't get to a place where that becomes the norm. And I think as we think about our interactions with people and humans, there is no replicating the interpersonal relationships that we can build when you're sitting face to face with someone. And that's what, the world that we're living in today is proving that out. People are longing for that more and more, even if regulations and restrictions prevent it.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's change the topic. I would like you to talk about what lessons or learnings, or we've been through almost 2 years now of a unique situation, tragic situation for certain people, but difficult and very special one, which is the pandemic, which has forced us to change many things. from the point of view of a person who likes you, is at the forefront of a very important multinational company, what has been the lessons and learnings, and what is coming out of it, of all this experience that made you more savant about your work, your company, and the people who work in it?
I think the comment that you just made, and we were just talking about, with regard to the metaverse and being able to connect with people, one of the biggest learnings for me is the need to make an extreme effort to connect with people. I mean, for me personally, I've never traveled so little in my entire career, and yet almost ironically, the ability to connect with people virtually has never been greater. And there's an interesting tension in there, because you can connect with more people, but the extent to which you are actually connecting with them on an interpersonal level just isn't there. So, for me, I long for the day when I can sit across the table from someone and break bread with them and, have a drink. But I think it's forcing us to make more of an effort, and it's also forcing us to empathize with people far more. To your point, it's been tragic on so many levels, and sometimes it's not always visible for us. So to really try and connect with people and understand what they're going through personally, professionally, there's an incredible obligation for us as leaders to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to take care of our people. And there's a duty of care that we have that's arising from this moment that I don't think was always as prevalent. And the situation that we're in has thrust that into the limelight even more. So it's making us realize that we can overcome everything together, but you have to work really hard to find those together moments and to make sure that they are deeply meaningful, as opposed to just, a 5-minute conversation in a virtual capacity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, along with perhaps that have a relationship with them, are the challenges for companies to take care of diversity and equity in their workforce, in the body of their employees. How are you dealing with this at Mindshare? How are you working on it to get better on that? And also, I would like you to mention if your clients are striving for it. I mean, that they are looking for diversity in the agency, that they're asking you to get better in that field.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, to your point, one of the things that I think we are starting to realize is, through this situation and working remote, and over the last 2 years, there's a genuine and growing concern from my side that it's going to set us back in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because the opportunities might not be as prevalent for mentorship or for reaching out to different universities or whatever the case might be. So we've got to work even harder as an industry to ensure that we're putting DEI, at the forefront of our conversations. I had an interesting conversation with a client the other day, to your question, and who said, we want diversity and equity and inclusion, but we don't just expect it, we demand it. And it was interesting because the concept of demanding, I kind of snapped back at them and I said, it's great for you to expect it, it's great for you to demand it, but if you yourselves aren't reflective of that, then it never works. Because actually there's a mutually reinforcing obligation from both sides to make sure that we attract, people from diverse backgrounds. And quite honestly, people on our side of the desk want to work with people on the other side of the desk that look like them, share their values, reflect their opinions. So it can't be expected. It can't be demanded. It has to be cultivated, and it has to be done together. And so, the first thing starts with recognizing that it's an issue in our industry. The second thing is recognizing that it's going to compound unless we do something about it. And then the third thing is, how do we address it together? And so from our perspective, we have a huge amount of effort that goes into supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And interestingly, there's some global approaches that are working. Like, we set out very early on to create a DEI charter globally that then can be nuanced locally. And I think that's the important thing, because as you know, diversity never shows up the same in any two markets. And the idea of inclusion is wildly different around the world.
Yeah, it's a very local matter indeed.
Yeah, entirely.
Okay, well, let's go to another great topic of conversation within the industry, which is not the flavor of the month, but it's the flavor of the almost a decade, which is neuroscience, which is something which has been talked about a lot and certainly has enormous possibilities and is growing and getting better and getting more to the point. And as far as I have heard, you're very interested in it. I would like you to explain, to talk a little bit from where your interest came from, and how do you see it? Do you see that it will have a real role within the industry in a not too distant future?
Yes, most definitely. I think our industry over the last decade, arguably more, but it's certainly been a focal point over the last couple of years, has been almost ruthlessly obsessed with the idea of precision. It went from scale to precision. And in doing so, we've been focused on understanding how we can find people, building identity graphs, leveraging cookies, various different approaches. But the reality is, that's only one part of the equation. The accuracy side of our craft and what we do. The other side, which has almost been neglected to a certain extent, is the empathy side. And it's the balance of accuracy and empathy that leads us to a place of not only being able to find consumers, but then talk to them in a meaningful and resonant way. And so, we think about the means that we had to understand consumers. It used to be, kind of old world copy testing and those sorts of things to understand creative, but that doesn't give you a deep understanding of motivations or behaviors or why people choose one thing over the other. And that, for me, I think, and for us, is why things like neuroscience come to play a pivotal role in what we believe future offerings are going to be, because it has to be the balance, the art and the science of finding consumers, but also then understanding them in the context of the platforms that they exist within, understanding how they're making decisions and what motivations they're making in those moments. And I think if we can start to do that and start to do it at a scale, then actually it starts to unlock all forms of new understanding. And to bring it back to your point earlier around the role of things like the metaverse, it becomes much more prominent in those settings where people feel incredibly immersed in those experiences. But if we don't understand their motivation for being there, or if we don't understand, their social context, we've hugely missed an opportunity to connect with them in arguably what is going to be a more meaningful and growing platform. So for us, we're wildly interested in it, and I think it's going to become much more a focus of conversation for the industry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's now go to your career, if you want, to your a bit more personal. And I would like you to explain, why did you came interested in advertising? How did you came into the industry?
I would say by chance, but it was a little more than that. I had a job working in PR and political PR for a little while, and it was back in the day before social media and that sort of thing, and everything was being used as a blunt instrument. It was like, all right, we need a video news release for this, we need a press conference for that, and I didn't see people using it in a holistic or integrated way, the way that communications kind of should be. And it was arguably a point of frustration for me. And I was talking to a friend who happened to work in media at the time, and they were like, "What you're describing is what I do."
Yeah.
And and I said, let's have another conversation. So we started talking a little more. And that friend happened to work at Mindshare.
Yeah.
And so it was purely by happenstance that I fell into media, but through the lens of PR, where I saw a much wider aperture that could be applied to communications and connecting with people. So it was kind of a passion and point of frustration that led me to where I am today, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So, certainly you have been trapped by it, because you've been almost 20 years now.
I like to say liberated, not trapped.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That is a good point. I mean, but anyway, you must be enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly am. It's one of those things where you have to be comfortable with change, and you have to be excited by the fluidity of our industry. It's why for me, people look at my background and my experience, and they see it as a linear progression.
Yeah.
Going kind of up the chain, and it certainly hasn't been that. I wish I could say that it was a carefully choreographed, well-architected plan, but it wasn't. It was,
I can understand you. Yeah.
It's funny because it was, I like to define it as a series of experiences. I've done PR, I've done media, I've done planning, I've done buying, I've worked on CPG, I've worked on IT. I've worked on, I've seen the industry through a multitude of lenses. I've done global, I've done local, I've moved around the world. And I think it's those amalgamations of experiences that have led me to I think where I am today. And I'm incredibly fortunate and grateful that I've gotten to do that within an organization that encourages and rewards that type of curiosity and willingness to kind of move around and try different things. So every time I've gotten bored or complacent and said, I've raised my hand and said, what's next? There's been nothing short of a multitude of opportunities.
Okay. Well, related to that, and I know it's maybe a little bit difficult to just look back to 20 years of evolution of an industry and a company, but what do you feel have been the things that have changed most in the role of media agencies in front of clients and within the industry, and also the things that have really stood the test of time and were important 20 years ago and are important now?
I think for me, it starts with the role of agencies, but it is actually far bigger, and it goes back to our earlier point around good growth. Clients have always expected that agencies would help them grow. And we used to do that by helping them connect with consumers at scale. And for most of our clients, we built our business on the basis of helping clients go global, expand into different territories and reaching consumers, with scale. I think more and more, though, through the advent of platforms becoming their own countries and becoming limitless in the way of geographical borders and expansion and that sort of thing, it's been redefined. So the idea of growth still exists, but it's not just through the lens of expansion. It is much more concerted, and it is much more what the future of growth holds. And so, the notion of good growth is kind of born out of what's always been enduring, that clients still want us to help them grow. But the role that we play as agencies has become much more expansive. And so we talk about our own evolution and transformation that we're going through as Mindshare, and we don't want to be a media agency. In fact, we think the idea of an agency is too narrow a definition and too narrow an aperture. We want to be a services company where the breadth of conversations that we have range from neuroscience all the way to organizational design, behavioral economics, transformation when it comes to the digital economy. And so, what I would say is enduring is the notion of growth. And what I think is changing is the requirements to help clients realize the idea of good growth, that you can grow in a more progressive, future-facing way. But in order to do that, you have to look at the world in an entirely different lens, which is what is good for business, what is responsible and respective of consumers, and how do we grow in a way that is enduring and diversified. And I think if we can start to think about growth through that new lens, it gives us a really different view of how we as an agency and even an industry need to evolve in the future. Broader services, different bench strength in terms of capabilities, and more upstream conversations with clients that are more consultative in nature, less arguably rooted in media transaction, and I think much more progressive in terms of what future growth looks like, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Well, you're the CEO of Mindshare, and you're the leader or the boss. Depending on who says it and who entirely depending on the feeling. But anyway, how do you see your role? How do you see leadership? What kind of leader you are, and what do you see as your strong points and things that you would like to get better at being at the front of a company with thousands of employees?
I think it's probably that last point. I work really hard to try and connect with our teams and to focus on our people. The type of transformation that we're trying to help clients through right now and navigate when it comes to good growth requires that we have people of hugely diverse perspectives, because growth inevitably is incredibly different around the world. It requires that we have a hugely diverse set of skill sets and capabilities, and more, looking beyond what media agencies have historically brought to the table. And so for me, I pride myself on my ability and willingness to get deep in the trenches with our teams and our people to not only set the vision for the company, but also help reinforce or articulate what it means for our teams. We often talk about the notion of our ambition or our employee value proposition being that we want to prepare our people for what's next, whether that's with us or even outside of the organization. And so we want this to be the place where people do the best work of their career. And I feel a personal responsibility to our almost 10,000 people around the world to do that. So my personal mission statement is to inspire people around me every day. And whether that's big or small, whether that is people in Mindshare or outside of it, it's something that I hopefully live and breathe and encourage, other people to emulate in what we do. And as you know, it can be sometimes a cold industry if we don't put people at the heart of what we do. And so for me, it's not only passion. I think it's an obligation as a leader, especially more and more these days, where it goes back to what we were saying earlier. There's so many different dynamics that people are grappling with personally, professionally, and the need to support our people as they weather these difficult times, hopefully speaks volumes to the type of organization that we are and want to be in the future.
Do you miss, or do you want to get back to normal, let's say normal office life and normal agency life? Are you expecting it to arise soon, or?
First of all, I don't know that there is going to be a new normal. I think we're going to be in a constant state of flux for the next couple of years, and the concept of normal is completely out the window. But we do think there are some things that are going to stick and stay. And we always talk about the idea that it takes 66 days to build a habit. And when you think about in the context of the fact that we've been in lockdown in most parts of the world or working remotely for 2 years, there's definitely habits that are going to stick. I think, working, virtually is certainly going to stay. It's not to suggest that that's going to be the norm 5 days a week. But, greater flexibility for employees, certainly, leaning into people working remotely, absolutely. But I will say, it goes back to your question earlier, there's nothing that can replace the bond and the connection of being with someone, sitting in the same room with them, bouncing ideas around together. So for me personally, I am excited to get back out there and to see our teams. And, my one issue with taking this job in the middle of a pandemic is, for a global CEO, I can count on one hand the number of markets that I've been able to get to. And that's an incredible point of frustration when, I want to be with our teams and I want to be in the same room as them. So yeah, certainly things that are going to stick, things that are going to change, but who knows what they look like. It's going to be a constant state of evolution, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's it. Your words have much to do with the next question I would like to pose, which is, much has been talked about in these 2 years about how we are changing, how societies are changing, our way of thinking, our way of feeling, our way of behaving, our way of coping with certain things. And even these people that said or even feels personally that they are a different person from pre-COVID, from pre-pandemic. How do you feel yourself? Do you feel you're kind of a different human being from 2 years ago?
I think certainly the values that I have are different. I've always prided myself on the ability to connect with people, but I never truly appreciated the extent to which, again, being in the same room with somebody impacted the ability to connect with them and to bond with them. I never even appreciated that, I think, to this extent with my own family, where I was constantly on the road, constantly, trying to be with clients and see teams and that sort of thing. And my own focus on family and I have a 4-year-old at home. So being with her has reinforced, I think, the value of family and interpersonal connections. And so, yeah, I would say absolutely. If you haven't changed in some capacity over the last 2 years, I would question what you've been living through and what planet you're on, I would say.
Yeah. what kind of a strange being you are.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Well, I don't want to take much more of your time, but just the last 2 questions if you want. And one is, posing this question and to all our interviewees, we are asking for a recommendation, a reading recommendation or a seeing recommendation, be it a book or a novel or a series, a TV series or movie, something that you enjoy particularly and you feel like recommending to our readers and viewers.
So from a book perspective,
no need to be professional, just something that you like. And yeah.
From a book perspective, I have a really strange habit. I try and alternate between fiction and nonfiction. And so the latest that I picked up, the nonfiction was, I just read Mark Benioff's biography. That he's the CEO of Salesforce. And now my nonfiction is The Alchemist, which was sitting on my bookshelf and I hadn't read in a really long time. So I'm reading that. But the one thing that I read just over the weekend that I would recommend to everyone, I mentioned it earlier, but it's something that is, I was just pretty profoundly moved by, is the New York Times article from Patagonia's CEO, where he talks about the importance of businesses being able to drive business, but also do something more for the world around us. And I think if every CEO, CMO out there isn't reading or thinking that way, it's an incredibly compelling view that hopefully inspires everybody to think a bit more progressively about the future of the world around us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, now from the future, let's go back a little bit to the 80s, because I've read that you're a big fan of 80s music. And so for every one of our readers and viewers, but especially for the younger generation, you should say your, let's say, three most liked artists of the time.
This is
that
my...
people should listen to.
This is a guilty pleasure for me, and one that I'm sometimes loath to admit.
Why guilty? I mean, it's great music. Do not feel guilty about it.
Maybe you and I can appreciate it. I hope others do. Yeah, I'm a huge 80s music fan. I don't know why. I think maybe one of my first concerts was Billy Idol. So I think that's perhaps why.
Wow.
So
now, Miley Cyrus is doing a great job with him, just bringing him back to.
It's incredible. He looks great for his age.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Billy Idol, his formative years, Generation X, which was his band before that, and I think one that everybody should listen to is Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, OMD. Yeah. So a couple that are my go-tos when I need some thinking music.
Okay, Adam. Thanks a million indeed.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
Great to see you.